Hello and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. So we are going to be talking about DeliverPoint, and in particular, we're going to be taking a look at how to manage permissions inside of DeliverPoint, and not just inside of SharePoint, but also inside of Microsoft Teams and OneDrive as well now. And we're also going to focus on some of the new features that you'll be able to see in DeliverPoint. So first of all, what I want to do is just introduce myself. So my name is Brett Lonsdale, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Lightning Tools, and also the co-founder of a fairly new company, a company that we started just last year during the pandemic, and that is called Enlightening. And Enlightening is a company that can provide coaching across the Power Platform, such as Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, and also SharePoint and Teams as well. So I'm also heavily involved in the community and received the award of the MVP several years ago. And I'm also a organizer of an event called Collab Days, which is actually taking place next week. And usually this is an in-person event in Birmingham, the UK, not Birmingham. And basically, this event is this year, of course, a virtual event. So anybody in the world can join as long as you want to get up early enough. If you are in the States or anything like that, there will be an event, and there's all sorts of sessions around things like Azure and SharePoint and Teams, and also the Power Platform in there as well. And the final thing, just to mention, is I'm a co-host on techsplaining.net, which is a pod show, so you can join there, and we tend to interview other MVPs or other Microsoft people in relation to specific areas and get their sort of viewpoint on lots of different subjects. So that's myself and Lightning Tools. So we are a company that was founded back in 2007. So we're but the company was actually formed in 2007. Prior to that, we spent about a year of putting things together. So we're about 15 years old, and through that time, we've been specializing in providing different software tools for Microsoft SharePoint, and of course, that's evolved into the other technologies now, such as Teams and OneDrive, as I mentioned. So obviously here today we'll be talking about the permissions management tool and how permissions work inside of SharePoint, and how to get the best out of our product, DeliverPoint. But we also have other products that are also available for SharePoint and Teams, whether it's on-premises or SharePoint Online. And these include content aggregation software tools and discussion boards. We've also got some data integration and data visualization products, and also a list form design tool as well. So of course you can go and check out our website, lightningtools.com. There's lots of information there about the different software tools that we provide, and how you can use those, sign up for a demo, etc. So that's us. What we'll be first of all looking at is the different challenges that our customers often face, and this is we're in a great position here because I speak a lot on SharePoint permissions, but also every single time we're engaging in different customers in different verticals of all different sizes, and you tend to find that a lot of the permission challenges that these companies face are very, very similar. And they could be around how to best assign permissions, and because maybe there's not been any sort of regulation around that they've been assigned in multiple different ways, which makes it confusing to try and determine who's got what permissions to content that you may manage as a business user, or also from a central IT perspective, and who's got permissions through the different sites inside your organization. So we'll take a look and discuss that in a moment. Also around permission inheritance, how can we determine where permission inheritance has been broken? What can we do about it? Because perhaps we haven't got the time to be managing permission inheritance on an object by object basis, and by that I mean sort of folder by folder or file by file. So that can be extremely time consuming, and we can talk about some good practices when it comes to sharing folders and sites and things, and how you can actually avoid some of that permission inheritance breaking. There's also sharing links as well now, which is a little bit different, something you can do within OneDrive and also within inside of lists and libraries throughout SharePoint. And this is slightly different. Rather than actually assigning a direct permission to files and folders, you're basically providing the link to somebody, and that somebody could be an internal user or could also be an external user if your organization allows it. So that again can be challenging, because of course you can go in and have a look at who's been granted a link access to your file or folder, and can they read the files in there, or can they also write to the files in there as well. So this is something we can determine by looking at each individual file or folder, but again, that's a time-consuming thing. So I want to show you how we can use DeliverPoint to produce a single report across all the content that you manage, and how you can get a good handle on what files or folders have been shared and with who, and who shared it. So we'll take a look at all of that. We'll also have a look at what happens to users' permissions when they change role. So if you imagine somebody changes from working on one particular project to working on another, or changes departments, or even leaves the organization, how do we, when sharing links have existed, broken permission inheritance has been created on lots of different files and folders throughout the SharePoint tenant, how can we actually find all those places where these unique permissions exist, and therefore this user that's left the organization or changed roles once had permissions? So we'll look at how we can overcome that. And also the sort of thing to do, there's obviously a lot of privacy laws and requirements, especially in some sectors, to audit permissions regularly as well and prove that you have done. So how can we even start doing that when it's so time consuming to check on permissions? So these are the things that we're going to be discussing throughout the demonstration. And we'll just start off with the top point, which is how are users assigned permissions? And if we sort of follow the typical SharePoint way of doing things, where we may just create a new site, and we get the members group and we get the owners group and we make people a member, then basically what we're doing is we're giving lots of people the ability to not just create documents and edit documents and delete documents, but those people can also share information as well, and so on. We may want to tie that down. So it could be that you have created your own groups, and you have assigned those groups things like contribute permissions and things like that, which is all well and good, and there's good reason to do that. But the thing is there's not really a sort of uniformed way of doing it. Another way of assigning permissions is through the Microsoft 365 groups. So making people a member at that point. When you create a site, you're basically creating a Microsoft 365 group, and that provides the permissions throughout not just SharePoint, but Teams and everything else as well. Or you may also use Active Directory security groups if you've got those created for a department and you're nesting those inside a SharePoint group. That's another way to grant permissions. Or of course, you could give people direct permissions as well. So there's all these different ways, and want to sort of focus on a couple of those. One of them is the Active Directory security permissions that way. And the one challenge with that method is that you can't enumerate those groups. You can't see who's a member of those when you're inside of SharePoint. So if you're a business user and you're trying to determine everybody that's been permissioned with inside your site, this is something that you won't have visibility on, unfortunately. So we'll look at how we can address those requirements as we go through. Okay, so DeliverPoint, how can DeliverPoint help with permissions? Well, DeliverPoint is fairly unique in the fact that it helps not just IT or consultants sort of report and manage permissions from a central perspective, but it also gives users that may be site owners or have full control to content to also report and manage permissions on their content. So this would include, if you've created a new site, or if you're a site collection administrator, or somebody's giving you full control to a site, one of the things that you can do is, of course, report and manage the permissions on that content whilst you're inside a site, and that's using SharePoint natively. But it is on a sort of object-by-object basis that we'll have a look at in just a second. So what DeliverPoint does is it embeds different controls, so they are available from within the site. They're available against the files and folders that you may select inside a document library. They're also available inside lists and libraries and so on. So you don't have to go anywhere to a separate tool. You can actually execute these reports whilst you're inside the site, or you can also do it centrally as well. So we've got the best of both worlds here, that a user who's a business user can report and manage permissions and have a better understanding as to who's got access to their content, who has sharing links and so on. But also IT has that sort of confidence as well that the structure is in place and there's uniformity to how permissions have been granted. So how does DeliverPoint do this? Well, when you're within a site and you're interacting with SharePoint as a business user, again, with site owner rights, so you have the full control, you'll be able to see the different DeliverPoint options available to you whilst you're inside that site or whilst you're inside a list or a library. And some of those reports, we refer to them as Discover Permissions Reports. And the Discover Permissions Report is something that you can execute against any of the objects. So whether it's the site, the list, library, or folders and items. And notice that's plural. So if you imagine that yourself within a site, you want to check permissions, maybe on a regular basis. It could be that you're going to do this on a sort of quarterly basis or a monthly basis or something like that, rather than sort of having to dig into all of the different groups and see who the members are and work backwards. The Discover Permissions Report will actually show you everybody that's permissioned, what permission they have, and how that permission came about. And that's something we'll take a look at in just a second. You can do the same thing with lists and libraries, and when you're inside a library, you can select as many items or folders as you like and report across all of them in one go. So that saves you a tremendous amount of time when you're trying to report on permissions for each individual folder inside your document libraries. Now, all of that is good, but what's even better is the Advanced Discover Permissions Report, because one of the things you can do here as maybe a site collection admin is to be able to run a advanced permission report. So I just want to focus on everything inside my site collection that has unique permissions. So it could be that there's files and folders that have had their permission inheritance broken, subsites that have got broken permission inheritance, and so on. And this report will include all of that, allowing you to focus on just those objects with unique permissions, and then you can manage those permissions from there as well. So maybe doing some cleanup, like removing permissions or transferring permissions between accounts. There's also the Sharing Links Report. So this is something that you can run again within a site, and it will include all of the libraries in that site and tell you what files and folders have been shared. Not only can you do that within a site, but you can also do it on a user's OneDrive too, if you have permissions to that content. And then finally, the manage options include the ability to remove permissions. So if you have somebody that retires from your organization or from your department, you can remove their permissions. Even if they can't authenticate anymore, they are still going to flag up as somebody that has permissions in your site, and that's something that you can clear up easily using DeliverPoint. Maybe if somebody joins your team, so you have a new salesperson or a new member of the accounts team, something like this, you can copy the permissions from an existing account to somebody that's replacing them, and that's just one single action. So even though you could just add them to the members group, usually that's not enough because there's so many broken permissions on files and folders or the sharing links that they need and that type of thing as well. And all of that will be copied when that new user starts the organization. And a transfer permissions is a similar thing. So you can transfer permissions away from one user to another in the same way as the copy permissions would work. So let's jump in and take a look at it. You've heard me talk enough, so we'll jump into DeliverPoint here. And I'll just point out, first of all, some of those challenges that we spoke about. And by clicking onto the cog icon in the top right-hand corner of a site, so I'm in here as potentially a site owner, and we can go to the site permissions option within that cog icon, and it will show me here the site owners, the site members, and the site visitors. And if I expand those, you can see of these three SharePoint groups that we've got some entries, and those entries include, in this case, 2 Active Directory security groups. So there's accounts payable and there's sales, which is a great sort of departmental way of assigning permissions, because you've then got the one place that you can go to remove somebody should they leave the organization. If they stop being a salesperson for Lightning Tools, I can take them out of the sales Active Directory security group for Lightning Tools, and that's that one place that I need to remove them from. But it's impossible from the user perspective to actually be able to see the members of that group. So I'm fully trusting in IT that they've taken the right people out of that group, and it's not something that I have control over. Just above that, the one in the middle here is a Microsoft 365 group, and that one will show you the members. So as we hover over it, I can see that this particular group has 4 members, and that's great. I can obviously see who's been permissioned on there. I can email that group and so on. Okay, and there's also the advanced permission settings that you can go to. Now, notice one thing. There's 2 users in here that didn't show up on the side panel. It was not until I got to the advanced page that I actually saw that there's these 2 users here, and they didn't show up because they're not actually inside any of those 3 groups, those SharePoint groups. They're given direct permissions, and this can be easily missed if, for example, demo user 10 no longer worked in my department. I may have overlooked the fact that demo user 10 was permissioned if I just focused on that side panel alone. But even so, I still need to do a bit of digging to check for other users that may appear inside some of these other groups. So with that in mind, let's just jump in on DeliverPoint and see how that compares. So when I'm in here as a site owner, I'll see this little discrete option in the top right corner that allows me to come in and discover the permissions. And that's the first report that we're going to take a look at. And the Discover Permissions report, you can see here, lists every single user. It doesn't matter what group they're a member of, they're going to be listed, and they may be listed more than once. So keep in mind that this is on the same site that we just looked at. I can see there's lots of duplications in here. Demo user 10, as an example, has full control to the site implicitly because they are a site collection admin. There was no mention of that. Also, explicitly, they're a member of the owners group. So we can see this one, and also they're in the members group. But as I expand that members group, you'll see that it's because they're inside the Microsoft 365 group or the Office 365 group, and there's also this direct permission at the bottom here. So it's really easy to overlook those permissions if you thought that you'd removed them, but they're still granted permissions in another way. And you'll see the same thing with things like Active Directory security groups. So demo user 4 is permissioned through the accounts payable security group, as is demo user 2, and so on. So this report here can be especially useful within a site, and it allows you to really sort of focus in on those users as well through things like filtering. So we can filter out all the other users and just really concentrate on demo user 10 and what permissions demo user 10 may have. We can also focus in on a permission level. So quite likely you're going to have pages and pages and pages of permissions. But what we can do here is look at a particular permission level and see who's been granted those permissions. Or you can also filter on the how they were permissioned. So this includes any groups as well. So if I put in the word sales, for example, that's the sales Active Directory security group, and I can see that there was 2 users that were permissioned in that way. So it provides absolute clarity at the site level as to who's got permissions. Okay, so that's on the site. Let's have a look at the content within inside the site now. And in here, you'll see I've got a group of different folders and files and so on. And of course, with SharePoint, one of the things I can do is pull up the Manage Access. So I can do that on a single file or folder. It will tell me whether there's a sharing link and gives me the option of copying that link as well. And beneath that, we see the same challenge that we saw before with inside the site, in the fact that it's not that detailed as to who's got permissions on that folder. Now, again, you can go into the advanced view and work all of that out, but we have lots of different folders. We have lots of content that we're generating every single day. So one of the things that is a challenge here is the fact that if you have more than one folder selected, that Manage Access disappears off that shortcut menu. So I literally do have to go in one folder at a time and manage the permissions on them or report on those permissions. And that's just not doable in most organizations, including things like the financial sector, where there's so much content being generated all the while. So that said, you'll notice when we come to SharePoint and we're using DeliverPoint, that we have the Discover Permissions option on the command bar at the top of a library, but also as we go through and select multiple files or folders, that we can also discover the permissions across multiple objects at the same time. And again, this is all contextual. You're doing this as the site owner inside the actual library, not in a separate tool. So, so that's everybody that's permissioned on that. And it's a similar report to what you saw before. So we can drill through all of this and see who's permissioned on that content. And if I had a new starter, for example, one of the quick things I might want to check is, what did I permission this user right across all of those files and folders? Do they have access to them? So it's giving me that assurance there that I have. Now, even that is a big step forwards, but there's still a lot of content. There's still the fact that inside the library, there's perhaps nested folders that have broken permission inheritance, and we're going to overlook them. So one of the things that I mentioned about in the slide was the advanced discover permissions report. And this is available here. So you can do a advanced discover permissions report across the entire site collection. And what we're going to focus on, if you drill into the settings here, is anything with broken permission inheritance. So in there, I could choose any subsites with broken permission inheritance, or any lists or any items, and I could also include the sharing links as well if I wanted to. So I can generate that, and then inside that one report, we've got the site permissions all listed out, but it's not just giving me the current site permissions, it's also giving me subsite 1, which happens to have unique permissions. And as I drill in, you won't see any mention of subsite 2, which is there, but it has inherited permissions, which is why it's not showing up in this report. I can also see the list permissions for 2 different libraries here, and I've also got item permissions as well that I can view. And all of this can also be exported out. So if you want to take this into Excel as a snapshot, that's something that you can do at that stage. Okay, so great reporting there. And the other one that I wanted to show you was a sharing link. So one of the things that you can do as a user, and you don't even need to have full control to do this, is I can share files. So it may be that somebody's just requested that they have access to a financial document or something like that inside my library, and I oblige. So I click onto the ellipsis here, and I can go up to, instead of the manage access, I can go to share. And when I click share, I'm given several different options. And granted, some of these may be turned off inside your organization. So I could share with an external user. So I could choose specific people. Notice the default is to allow editing. But when I apply that, I can go through and put in an account. I'm just going to use my Gmail account here and copy the link or send that link to the user. And that will create a sharing link on that particular Excel document. Okay, so one of the good things about this is only that user is that specific user that can access that specific file. But another thing that you can do, if I just deselect that one, is also come in here to manage access. Sorry, ignore me. Is also come in here to share. And I could choose anybody with the link. And again, that allows editing by default. You could, if you wanted to, set an expiry date on that or set a password. And this is similar to sort of sending that file out as an attachment. The user with that in their email could forward it onto whoever they like. So if you have this link, you have access to the document and you have the ability to write to that document. So how do you keep track of all of those? Again, you could, using SharePoint natively, just go into the manage access and you can see the sharing links that have been created. But once more, you have to do that on a file or a folder at a time. You can't do it when you've got more than one file or folder selected. So with DeliverPoint, we have a sharing links report that you as a site owner can execute, and we just click onto that sharing links, and it will include anything inside the library that has a sharing link on it. So you can see here those 2 files that I just shared. I can see the date and time that they were shared, who shared them, the sharing type, so whether it's anybody or specific people. And if it's specific people, I can see who those specific people are. Now, if I don't like that, especially the one at the top, I can select it and choose from the actions menu, the sharing links management, and delete the sharing link. And we could do that on one or all or multiple sharing links that have been shared throughout that site. Okay, so that's most of the reporting that you can do as a business user with inside the site. In fact, I just wanted to show you as well that when we do a discover permissions, you can also perform actions from in here as well. So it might be, for example, that demo user 10 has design permissions, and demo user 10 has perhaps been furloughed or something's happened. I need somebody to take over their role, and I could select demo user 10 in this case, and from the actions menu, go to the account management, and I could copy the permissions from demo user 10 to another user. So here it's selected that, it's set the scope to the site, and we can then choose who we want to copy that to. So that could be another user. So I'll choose demo user 12 as an example, and we'll hit run. And notice it's not just done it on the site, but it's done everything that is in scope of the site. So there's subfolders and things like that that now that user has access to. So when we go through and discover the permissions one more time, you'll see here that demo user 12 now has the same permissions that were granted to demo user 10. Okay, so that's the type of reporting and management that you have here with inside of SharePoint, and we'll also focus on OneDrive and Teams as well. So if we are in the Teams environment, and we'll spend more time on this in just a moment, but you'll notice here that we can add DeliverPoint into my my Teams environment, and I can do a similar thing from within there as well. You can either add it here sort of centrally, or you can add it to a specific team if you need to manage the permissions on that one team, and you've got the same reports and the same management features available there. And from a OneDrive point of view, if we go into this view here, one thing that we can do is do a search on a particular account. So if, for example, I did a search on my colleague Sandy, I can select that user, and from the reports menu, I can have a look at the OneDrive sharing links. So if there's any sharing links that she's generated in her OneDrive, we can see what those are, and again, who has access to those, and so on. And there's not just the sharing links, but also OneDrive direct permissions, as we saw inside the SharePoint document library as well. And that's a new feature of DeliverPoint. Okay, so all of that is contextual stuff that we can do within the site. Let's take a look at what you can do centrally. So centrally, there's the same reports available, so things like the discover permissions, but one of the things that's different here is we can run the reports not just with inside the current site, but we can actually span multiple sites and multiple site collections if we want to, including hub sites and associated sites, or teams and channels and that type of thing too. And sometimes it's difficult to actually spot the differences between two sites. And one of the things that may flag up is the fact that one site has unique permissions and another one is inheriting, and you're not sure why one of them has unique permissions. So one of the useful reports in that regard is the ability to compare permissions between two or more selected sites. And that really will just spell out what the differences are and save us even more time when we're trying to produce the permission reports. You also have the large scope sharing links reports. There's a report that also focuses on an individual's permissions, the unique permission report. So we can do this not just with inside a single site, but also across entire site collections. We can produce that report. And then we also have some other things as well, which are useful when people have retired, like dead account reporting, which means they're still permissioned inside of SharePoint, but they've perhaps been removed as a user inside our Active Directory. And we've got a similar sort of thing on unlicensed users. So if a user no longer has a SharePoint license, but still has permissions in SharePoint, they will flag up. And we also have external user reporting and things like that too. So these are the different reports, and managing those permissions, you again can copy, transfer, delete permissions, or grant and revoke permissions between accounts, but on large scales, not just the current site. And we've also now got the ability to clone entire permission sets, which means you could spend a lot of time assigning permissions to one particular site that may be a hub site, for example, and you want the same people to have the same permissions to another hub site, which is an entirely different site collection. So with DeliverPoint, rather than going through that process again of assigning all of those permissions, you can simply just clone the permissions from one site to the next, or from one list to the next, or from one item to the next, and even any sort of combination of those as well. So you could go from a site to an item, for example. And you also have the ability to reset or break permission inheritance. So let's take a look at the central permissions management. So it's still accessed from within inside of SharePoint. We can hit the downward arrow in the top right corner of any site and go to the DeliverPoint dialog, or if you prefer, you can also add a page. And so that can just be a page that belongs to one of the IT sites or something like that. And you can go through and add DeliverPoint as a web part on that page there. So then you would go here to go through and manage all of the permissions across your entire tenant. Now, a lot of people raise an eyebrow at that point. Is that allowing everybody to come in and manage permissions? And the answer to that is no. You cannot do anything with DeliverPoint that you wouldn't be able to do with out-of-the-box SharePoint. So everything is security trimmed. If we can't read a site, you won't see the site. If you don't have full control to a site, you won't be able to change permissions on that site, and so on. So everything will be security trimmed. There's no way that you'll be able to do something you wouldn't ordinarily be able to do with SharePoint. So going into the central permissions management piece, having said what I just said, in here is the tenant administrator, and I have full control to everything. So therefore, we're going to see everything in here. And there is a DeliverPoint legend that displays several different icons in here. And those icons are referring to this tree view. And I'm just going to expand this, this tree view out. So you'll notice that we can expand a site collection, and we can see the sites inside that site collection and all the lists and libraries inside each of these sites as well as we drill down into them. And one of the things that you may pick up on is there's sometimes a dimmed icon and there's sometimes a full color icon, which again is explained in the legend here. So anything that is full color, it's not dimmed. Anything that is full color has unique permissions. The permission inheritance has been broken on those objects. So I can clearly see subsite 2 is inheriting. And the same thing with the document libraries. So notice these two document libraries here, they have full color icons. They have unique permissions. Compared with this one here in subsite 1, that's inheriting permissions and the icon is dimmed. So now I'm not having to even waste my efforts in producing the permission reports on most of the objects because I can tell where to focus my efforts. So subsite 1, I may need to investigate why that has unique permissions. So one of the things I could do is actually just select it and also its parent, the top level site here. So I've got both of those selected on the tree view, and we can go to the report menu. Now I could discover the permissions across those two sites and filter those out and so on, or I can also just simply go in and compare the permissions. So comparing it will highlight the differences for me. So I can see that demo user 12 has design permissions on one of the sites, demo user 6 also has design permissions. Sandy, you see, it doesn't have any permissions on that one, but she does on subsite 1. So this is the sort of stuff that's useful, and now I can decide, was that intentional then? Should that be the case for subsite 1? And if I wanted to, I could also compare to subsite 2, or even take sites from different site collections as well. So we can compare across site collections and look at the reports within that regard too. Okay, so so that's just some of the reports that you can produce here. The other type of views that we've got, you'll notice that this tenant view includes not just classic site collections, but also includes teams and Microsoft 365 groups and hub sites and so on. And you can focus it in just on those objects too. So anything that is a hub site, when we drill in, we actually see all the associated sites and we can run permission reports or perform permission operations on those. There's also a Teams view as well, which will include the likes of private channels and that type of thing. Now I'm going to jump into this accounts view because this will allow me to also focus in on a particular user and or users. I'm going to choose demo user 5 as a user, and from the reports menu I can pull up the unique permission report that will actually tell me everything I need to know about demo user 5. And there's actually not a great deal to know about demo user 5. I thought there was more about that one. Just bear with me. I'll just pull up the unique permission report. Not much on either of those. Okay, let's go with this account. That's a little bit better. Okay, so with this one, we can see the scope for my report. So what site collection was I running this on? I can also see the account membership. So these are the groups that this account is a member of. And we don't just stop short at SharePoint groups. It's Microsoft 365 groups, Active Directory security groups, and SharePoint groups. So we can see all the group memberships. And also I can see that this user is also a site collection administrator as well. Now, if there was unique permissions granted to folders and documents, they would also show up inside this report. And from there, you can actually start to perform some actions. So if, for example, we wanted to change this permission, we could select this row, and that becomes the scope then for the different operations like the copy, transfer, delete, grant, and revoke permissions. So some really useful views there. Now, the other thing we can do, if I select an entire site collection, is you'll see here the reports menu includes some of those other reports that we talked about, like the sharing links. We've also got a unique objects report. So literally within inside a site collection or multiple site collections, I can pull up a single report of everything that has broken permission inheritance. And from there, we can start to drill into some of these different objects. So if we saw there was a particular financial document or something like that that had unique permissions, I can go through and select that object or objects. And from the reports menu, then we can discover the permissions and see who has access to that content. And again, if we don't like what we see, we can remove people from here. That becomes the scope for the operations, like the ability to copy, transfer, delete permissions, and what have you. So there's the unique objects. We also have other reports as well. Such as the dead account report and things like that we'll take a look at in a moment. Okay, so with that in mind, one thing I do want to do here is also show you when we have a site selected that, sorry, just bear with me one moment. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so so when I run this report, like I said, we've got things like the dead accounts, which we could run across multiple site collections here. So this will show me anybody that has been taken out of the Active Directory for whatever reason and is still permissioned. And from there, we can select any of these accounts and remove them. And the same thing will occur on the unlicensed users or the external users and things like that too. The other thing I wanted to demonstrate is if I run a unique object report with inside here, I can select a site, and from that site, we can go to the permissions management, and this is where we can copy the entire site's permissions. So anybody who has access to this particular site, I could transfer those permissions, or sorry, clone those permissions to another site as well. So we've got the scope is the source site here, and then I can target other sites, other lists, or other items. So literally, we just go through and select where that site is. It could even be in a different site collection, like this one. And we can choose whether or not we want to process other objects like folders, lists, and items. We can support a rollback, so we can undo the operation if we want to. And we can also optionally modify any groups in here as well. And if it is in a different site collection, we could also clone those permission levels and the group names as well. So I'll execute that, and that will go through, and as we run that, that will perform that action. So that copies those permissions across for the entire permission set. And not only are we doing that here at the site level, but we could also do this against lists or items too. So if I was to select an item, notice that on the permissions management menu that we also have this copy item permissions option as well. Okay, so that's a lot of the sort of central management things that we can do here. Again, you've got the copy, transfer, delete permissions. You can always go back to the jobs to see what jobs you've created, and you can roll those back if you want to. So if we want to undo an operation that we'd performed, you can do that, and you can limit the jobs that are displayed based on date and time, which obviously makes your life a lot easier as people change roles and so on inside an organization. Okay, so that's managing permissions centrally. So just as a sort of recap, how DeliverPoint can potentially help you when you're producing the permission reports. It's not something that people typically have time to do because it is time consuming to do it an object at a time. So we get a lot more efficient when we're providing reports and managing permissions, but more importantly, it provides you that confidence as well. So if this is something that you have to do regularly, like auditing permissions, then you have the confidence that the right people do have that right permission, and you're able to export that out to Excel as well. So you've got a snapshot of that content. And of course, it reduces the chance of any information leaks as well with things like the external sharing or sharing the link there. So there is a few resources, and we'll open up for questions in a moment, but if there's any sort of specific requirements you have around permissions, then you can arrange a tailored demonstration. And in order to do that, you'll find the link probably on our website by going to lightningtools.com, but there's also a QR code here that you can scan. That's going to take you straight to the demo sign up. And there's also a 30-day trial as well. So same sort of thing, if you scan that QR code, that will take you straight to the page where you can download the trial and put DeliverPoint into perhaps one of your non-production tenants to see if that's going to serve your requirements around permissions management. And of course, you can follow us on Lightning Tools. Under YouTube, there's a lot of videos with talking a lot about permissions and DeliverPoint at the moment. In some of the videos that you'll find on Lightning Tools, there's a new video series that we've started called Lightning Tools Chat. And we've been talking a lot about DeliverPoint in there. So if you watch those videos, it will give you some sort of highlights as to the different features in the product and other permission sort of management issues as well. So at that point, I'm going to open up for questions. See that there has been some. You guys have been quite active. So I've not been able to read them yet. Obviously, I've been presenting, but yeah, feel free to post any questions in the Q&A panel, and I'll read those out and answer them. Or if you can't think of any questions now, but you have some at a later date, please email me on brett@lightningtools.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have there too. Okay, so let's have a look. All right, I've got a feeling I may have answered some of these as I went through, but let's go through them anyway. So one of them is I want to be able to view if it's possible. Sorry, I want to know if it's possible to view engagement stats on SharePoint pages and sites to see who viewed the page and what they clicked on. So there are tools to do that. It's not one of the things that DeliverPoint will do. Yeah, that's not possible, I'm afraid. For now, I add profiles manually via adding viewer rights to SharePoint sites through adding their emails to share, but within the organization. Is there a way to add a group of users, for example, the support team? Yes, certainly. So, so with that, you could go in and create a SharePoint group, or you could also create a Microsoft 365 group, add the members to that, and then you can assign the relevant permissions to either the SharePoint group or to the Microsoft 365 group. Yeah, in order to do that, it's fairly straightforward. I'll just Alt-tab back into SharePoint again. So actually, it's easier. So I'm going to show you how to do this in native SharePoint. So if you go into the Site Permissions, Advanced Permission Settings, in here you can create a group. So if you wanted to create a new group and give that a name, I forget what you wanted to call it. So support team, I think was the name. There we go. So we can create a support team. You can specify the group owner, and it's a good practice actually to make that the site collection administrator, just in case the users change in the future. Okay, and yeah, you've also got the permission that this group will receive. So I could choose contribute as an example, and this is a great way of avoiding everybody getting edit as well by becoming a member. So I can create that group, and once that group is created, I become a member of it. But what I can also do is go through and sorry, under new, add users to this group. So in here we can now start to add like demo user 1, demo user 2, and so on, and those users will now be permissioned. And yeah, this is a really good practice way of doing it, because you've given people the permission level that you want them to have, as well as being able to control that with inside a group. So hopefully that will answer that question there. Is it possible to provide a temporary access to a user that is not in our organization? So consulting firms and partner organizations. So yeah, you when you do use the sharing links, you can create that option. So when you go through and share something, it's just a case of saying, just bear with me, I'll pull it up. So when I hit share, and we go to maybe share anybody with the link, there is the expiration date that you can set. So that's a great way of doing it, sort of on a folder or something like that. Also, DeliverPoint can help you here as well. So if that was more than just a sharing link, if you wanted to share an entire site, for instance, you could grant the permissions through DeliverPoint. So using the grant permissions option and check in the rollback feature. So when that contract ends, you can simply come back and roll back this processing or remove any permissions that user was granted in that role. So that could take care of lots of different permissions that the user had received. Okay, another good question here is any data stored outside of our tenant? Absolutely not. So yeah, DeliverPoint is a SharePoint framework application. So it's installed simply by dragging and dropping the application into the app catalog, and that's what makes all the DeliverPoint features available. But we don't do anything with your permissions other than report on them, and so everything basically remains as is inside your environment. So there's nothing that goes outside of your tenant at all. And then I think I answered this one. So with Lightning Tools, do you access it via SharePoint? What are the interrogation steps, and do I need a special expertise to interrogate it? Okay, so basically, yeah, as you see, it's all baked into into SharePoint and Teams, and that appears by dragging it and dropping it into the app catalog. To do that part, you would need to have access to the app catalog. So it may be that you need to go out to a tenant admin if you're not one. Or what you can also do is when you go to add an app, you can go to the SharePoint store and you'll find DeliverPoint is in SharePoint store. So if you do a search on DeliverPoint, and one of the things you can do here is click on it and request it, and that will send a message to your tenant admin, and you can create that justification. So that will literally go as an email to whoever is your tenant administrator, and they can choose whether or not they're going to approve your request of adding DeliverPoint. And then I think we have a final question here, which is it possible to provide temporary access? Oh, sorry, I've read that one. No, this one. So we have a group IT structure who manages permissions, and we are a division within the group company. So we don't have control to change those high-level permissions. How to work with permission or just our division? Yeah, so if you've got different divisions that are all sharing the same tenant, one of the benefits of SharePoint is the fact that you can set permissions on a site-by-site basis with unique permissions. You can also, of course, set the permissions at the site collection scope as well. So, so that would be the way forward, and yeah, we'd be happy to help with that as you go. So, as long as you create a new site collection, you can go through and grant the permissions on that. Okay, and the only other thing I see is a comment about being glad there's a pandemic, so being able to join these events virtually. Well, yeah, even prior to the pandemic, we do run these webinars, so feel free to join these anytime. We do advertise the webinars constantly on our website, so you can go to lightningtools.com and view those on our homepage, so you'll see which ones are coming up, or if you subscribe to our newsletter as well, you'll be able to be notified that way. So I think that's all the questions I had here. So once again, if there is any questions that come up, please feel free to email me on brett@lightningtools.com. But otherwise, I want to thank everybody for joining. And next month, we will be running a webinar on a product of ours called Social Squared, which is a discussion board for Microsoft Teams and also for SharePoint. So if you want to join that one as well, look out for that on our homepage of our website, or like I say, subscribe to our emails, and we'll notify you. Okay, many thanks. Have a great rest of the day.